And welcome. We have our quorum now, so we can go ahead and start. I'm Molly Cummings, Vice Chair of the Council, and it's time to begin the regular meeting of the Committee of the Whole. It's Wednesday, August 17th. I call the meeting to order. First item is the approval of the agenda, and if there are no changes, we will consider it approved. Are there any changes on that? Seeing none, we will assume it is approved and move on to the approval of the minutes. Is there a motion and a second to approve the minutes of June 1?
So moved.
Second.
I'm sorry.
Thank you, thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the minutes are approved. Moving on, our information item tonight, we have Mike Larson, who is with us, and he is going to present on the 2050 Regional Development Guide Regional Vision. And Mike Larson, I think, is Angela Torres coming up as well? Or
Just me.
just you?
Yep.
That's terrific.
I have my support for
Great.
Vibrancy.
Welcome.
Thank you.
For being here.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and council members. It's good to see you again to continue. My name is Michael Larson. I'm planning analyst in local planning systems in the community development division. And I'm happy to be continuing a conversation with you. I mean, this is not the first time we've talked about the regional development guides, values, vision, and goals, and it won't be the last time, but look forward to continuing a conversation with you, get your input and ideas. So what I'd like to do with you today is do a little bit of a review and recap of where we've been. Want to reinforce the council's approach to shared language for its policy plans, and to start to explore with you get more concrete ideas for what may form the basis of regional goals for the 2050 Regional Development Guide. So this Lania Ross and Water Resources created this beautiful, very colorful graphic that shows that perhaps maybe you've seen before in other contexts. It really shows a distillation process for regional planning that arises out of what I would call knowledge building and an exploration process that leads to more specific goals and policies as we proceed forward. The colors across the bottom represent the different policy areas that the council has, including the three regional system plans, the housing policy plans, and the specific land use policies that will be part of the 2050 Regional Development Guide. And so I think this graphic is sometimes very helpful for folks to see kind of sort of that overall distillation process. And there's a lot of words on the screen, and I'll get into some details here in a moment around terminology. Oops, I'm clicking on my computer. My focus with you to date has really been on in the realm of, again, values, visions, and goals. And I'll be sharing some examples with you of how we might articulate these things. Values are really about core beliefs. And I wish I had brought my glasses. I'm gonna have to turn around and you can read this slide. But it's really core beliefs about how the council carries out its work, or core beliefs about the region. Vision is really overarching descriptions of what we want to achieve for the region, and goals are broad directional statements that more specifically describe end states for the region, and that's some of the more detail we want to get into with you tonight. So again, we're just really trying to reinforce this as shared language across policy so that the language is useful, whether it's meant to inspire or to provide broad direction, or to actually guide the specific work and metrics that we might collect around that work. So I want to give you some examples of where we might go with value statements. These are pretty much my proposals, my examples from what I've heard. Again, core beliefs the Metropolitan Council and its partners are transparent on our work and accountable to the people we serve. That's an example of a value, probably not a whole lot of controversy around that. One vision statement might say the region is interconnected by multiple modes of transportation, especially in ways that increase choice and reduce greenhouse gas. Of course, there's many ways that we might phrase this, ideas that we might include together or separately. Goals, again, broad directional statements. The region has clean, reliable and affordable sources of water. And as you know, there are various planning efforts going around the council around water resources, water supply planning, and so all of these are considerations for us as we develop sort of a broad region. So I want to talk a little bit about the next set of definitions that really view more about future phases of plan and policy development as well as implementation. These aren't really our current focus, but I think it's kind of important to keep in mind. We do, through our engagement, we do hear a lot of very specific ideas and examples that kind of may fall more within the realm of objectives, policies, and actions. You know, people might be more familiar with like their specific work responsibilities and how effective they feel in advancing maybe a particular goal that they may have. So you know, I think reinforcing sort of the efficacy of the language that we use in our plans will be useful, but the ideas and the information we get sometimes is a little bit all over the map. So kind of taking a dual track of wanting people to provide the input they want to provide, but also thinking about like how that language might be structured going forward and reinforcing that. So here's a few examples from existing policy plans around objectives. One from the Regional Parks Policy Plan, the council will leverage the regional park system, restore and protect natural resources, and of course, as a natural resource-based system, that makes perfect sense. One policy from the Transportation Policy Plan is that the Metropolitan Council will focus regional growth in areas that support the full range of multimodal travel. And not surprisingly, you know, policies aren't in their own silos. This one relates to regional land use policy as well and how we guide various regional investments to ensure the orderly development of the region. And actions are things that we might do on a day-to-day basis, and decision-making and budgeting and allocation of other resources. Council and regional transit providers will use regional transit design guidelines in performance standards to manage the transit network, to respond to demand, and to balance performance and geographic coverage. So more of the kind of day-to-day, year-to-year planning that happens with implementation. So we've had a lot of conversations with different groups, including you, mostly, you know, the usual suspects of the various council engagements that we have with the various advisory committees we have. We will continue to do so. We see a lot of universe of thoughts and ideas that can be roughly translated into themes, and from there we can start to consider maybe how we want to, the language that we might want to use that make most sense for us. Ultimately, I think we want to capture the spirit of what people the spirit of what people are thinking in kind of the clearest and the most concise way possible. One of the challenges that we have is that we have a wealth and a breadth of perspective and experience, and we hear lots of nuanced thinking and thoughts that, you know, kind of are part of the conversation, and sorting that is, we learn from that, we develop relationships with people as we talk about those things, and we kind of can build collaborative partnerships as we sort of struggle a little bit with the language. So I think the process of doing so will pay dividends in terms of our plans' effectiveness in terms of outcomes. So you had, I've shown you this slide previously. This may be familiar to you. I mean, the words you see on the screen are value words that we've heard from you and others. And you know, we've tried to kind of organize them into sort of related thoughts. In the near future, we'll have more of a concrete set to start to review, more of a complete set of language, but I wanted to show you kind of what we were thinking in terms of where we might go with some of these ideas. To give you one example here, keep looking at my computer. In this example, we zoom on these words related to like we hear about priorities. We hear about focus and making sure that we're effective in our work. So whether efficiency or efficacy is the word that we want to use. And so I think we want to translate this into value statements that would be more or less representative of what the example on the screen, that the region is effective and efficient as we're prioritizing the most important challenges and opportunities. So that's the kind of language that I think over time we'll start to see as proposed language, and get your feedback whether or not that captures the spirit of the values that the region has. and whether you might have suggestions for that. Here's another example. Around a set of ideas, the region is bold and innovative, bringing creativity, cultural competence, and innovation to our work. We're starting to share some of these ideas with staff, and so, of course, when given an opportunity to wordsmith, there's a lot of different ways that we might be able to say something along those lines. We have another set of values here we showed you before. They're more regarding the region itself, the people, the businesses, the land uses, the infrastructure. So groupings of particular words that sort of thematic. And here's an example that I think I'm just highlighting now because I think it's a pressing issue, or priority for the region. And how we might frame this is the Metropolitan Council and its partner organizations work to create a fair, respectful, and just region that overcomes racial inequities. So, again, if that's a statement that resonates for folks, that's the kind of something that we would want to move forward with. If we don't quite capture it, we would certainly want to, we will want to hear that as well. Here's another example. The region values its natural resources and works to ensure their resilience and sustainability in the face of climate change as well as regional development. So I want to now move on to themes. You've seen this slide before. There's many different things that are important to folks in the region, including yourself. Not surprisingly, we often hear about the elimination of racial inequities, creating a region where people feel welcome, where they feel valued, where they feel safe. Certainly a theme that's especially been the case over the last few years. Assuring the economic potential of the region by valuing entrepreneurship, as well as what a term inclusive growth model, I think, is a term that's used to describe valuing the diversity and the potential of the diversity in our region. Ensuring that as the region develops or redevelops, that natural resources, including natural resource systems, are either protected, preserved, restored, using those opportunities to enhance the natural environment, how we relate to it, and how it serves us. Again, another theme that there will be increasingly better options for mobility and accessibility, particularly those without personal vehicles. That may be through infrastructure or technology or services, ensuring that there are affordable housing choices and workforce opportunities throughout the region, and that the region's various places and destinations are vibrant and help create a sense of community. I think it's important. I think the last one here is that, about priorities and that our public investments focus on priorities, maybe not exclusively, but we do invest in priorities related to climate and sustainability as well as equity. So I would imagine that these themes, or as well as some version of them, would eventually end up in the 2050 Regional Development Guide. Maybe they're not worded quite this way, or maybe they're organized a little differently. Maybe there's something on the screen maybe there's something missing on the screen that we want to emphasize. But I would expect that these would be reflected. Okay, so so in a couple of minutes, want to begin a Mentee exercise with you. So we'll take this PowerPoint down and we'll start a Mentee exercise. Hopefully, I think you've all got your tablets. So we want to start to get your specific ideas about what are those end states are for the region, get a little more specific. Staff at the council want to support your continuing conversation around this process. And forthcoming as policy planning. Staff would also like concrete ideas and direction from you about what you think is important, that we can respond to what I've been calling kind of a virtuous cycle of input from the council, how we can continue to meet your needs and inform your conversation, what data you might need or focus to help refine your input. So when we begin our exercises, I certainly want to be as bold as you're comfortable with in your thinking, as specific as you can be about what you think those end states might be for our region. And again, although we're kind of wanting to reinforce the definitional language too, we can always find a home for ideas and language that might not be quite gelled. So I don't want to discourage broad ideas and thinking. And so we've also begun kind of a similar process with staff with subject matter experts for them to think about from what they see as staff, whether it's surface water management or water supply issues, or from people working in the transit system or economic development, better housing, affordability and such, to get their thoughts and then in turn share those ideas with you and compare those with your ideas and input. So these are the themes that we'll go through with you in the Mentee in the form of question. We'll get that to a second. I do put other at the end of the theme if we are missing something, if you think something's not highlighted and it really needs to be, I'd like to know that as well. So before we begin, again, I just want to emphasize kind of the language again. Where our emphasis has really been around values and vision, core beliefs, and what we want to achieve for the region. Where we are today is start to get some ideas and articulation around desired end states, however that might look. As we emerge into more of a policy phase, we'll start to get a little more detail with the different ways that we might achieve those goals, our policies for our organization, about how we relate to each other, what we prioritize in terms of funding, and specific discrete actions that we might take in furtherance of that. So, Madam Chair, I guess I will, that's me and my email address, if you didn't already know that. But I will move back to those themes. And Madam Chair, to ask you, I'm happy to entertain any questions about clarification, or happy to also just launch into the exercise. I want to leave as much time as you can for your conversation.
Okay, questions? Before we move forward?
Let's do the exercise.
Yeah, you excited?
I feel like any questions
So,
will probably evolve
I don't want to keep
statements.
talking at you. After a while, it's sort of uncomfortable. So I do have to hook this up here to shift gears. I might have to sit in the corner. There we go. Thank you. Okay. And we'll go over here. Hopefully Greg is paying attention. Hopefully I don't have anything incriminating in my. So I did spend some time ensuring that. So on your tablet, I'm going to make this full screen here in a second. So you can go to on your tablets, you can go to mentee.com. Hopefully, I think you've probably all done this before, right? Yeah. And then enter that code where you can enter questions about that. So what I want to do is give you a few minutes to start entering your ideas.
So M-I-N-T-E?
Yeah, MENTI.com.
Mine's not loading. Probably because everybody tried to do it at the same time.
Perhaps. How are your others doing?
I'm on.
You're on?
I haven't entered.
Yeah, we won't rush you.
What's the code?
The code is on the screen, but it's
Up on the top.
16. I can read it to you. You want to 1685203.
203.
Yeah. And as you,
I'm in.
yeah. Now you've mentioned ideas on this issue before, so that I acknowledge it's not the first time, but I want to revisit it.
Oh, this one.
Is you in?
My personal iPad will load, but the other one won't.
Okay, well, take your time. So hopefully the ideas will start to populate. There we go, public health. I should probably glasses. And no funny stuff from the peanut gallery. You like suggest home ownership rates? Yeah. Income disparities. Air quality, I'm sorry, should I let you focus or mind if I make a commentary as I see things?
Only if you were gonna say that's the best one.
That's the best one. No, I think one thing that, leadership and management throughout the organization, I think, looking for is, opportunities to identify shared goals that we can work on together. There certainly will be activities that may not have very much to do with other work divisions or work units, but certainly we can frame things through different lenses. Safety on the bus. Are any of you familiar with the Center for Economic Conclusions work on I'm sure some of you are on economic disparities. We've partnered with them on the regional economic framework. I think the phrase that I mentioned earlier is I think it's equity is the superior growth model. Have you heard that phrase or that idea before? I think one of the region's issues of economic competitiveness is the unrealized potential as a result of the significant economic disparities, and that a region would be considerably wealthier if we didn't have those disparities. And that does represent an opportunity in terms of vitality. Certainly one way of looking at it. So one of the wealth, I think, the disparities in wealth is something that is kind of a generational planning concern, and fortunately our plan does look out at least one generation. I was just wondering if anyone has any ideas about, I don't know if we had a particular case example about wealth disparities, but both wealth and income disparities are exacerbated by economic shocks like the 2008 recession as well as the pandemic. In our work with the Center for Economic Inclusion, I think one thing we heard was how progress by BIPOC communities can be wiped out very quickly when we have these economic shocks because their recent income increases and wealth increases are more vulnerable than. Something to think about in terms of our approaches and expectations. A lot of ideas here. Would anyone like to elaborate on what they shared? Again, the more all these are great. The more concrete, the better. Where we can, what's the word I'm looking for? Assign resources like strategy, objectives, and we can actually measure it. In 5 years, in 1 year, in 5 years, in 10 years, we could say what's the wealth gap this year? Have we made progress on it? I know I looked at the data recently as a result of the pandemic, but I don't think it's good. And how we can help recovery around that and think also about how to ensure that doesn't happen again.
Well, I put it here.
Yeah.
If I could, I put air quality.
Yeah, talk more about that, please.
Understanding that BIPOC communities have some BIPOC communities have terrible air quality, which leads to asthma, high asthma rates, which leads to not attending school.
It's related to public health and I don't mean to put Charles on the spot, but in terms of air quality analysis that the region does on a regular basis, is there an equal dimension to that ongoing analysis? Is that something that could form the basis of a regional goal?
Great question, Mike. I'm not sure.
That's fine, I don't know the answer yet.
And share the answer off the top of my head, but it's certainly something we can follow up with. In some of the work that we have done, there can be very localized differences in air
Right.
quality that don't play out at the regional scale, but certainly can be borne by different populations. Some of it point-based from things like infrastructure or from things like industries or power plants. Others more sort of emissions or tailpipe based
Right.
from things like transportation.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Barber?
One of the things I think we were looking at, thank you, Madam Chair, was, even along ABRT lines, and some of those where you're looking at from an environmental justice perspective, they have done some pre and post measurements and so on of what's in the air. So I think there are tools that we have likely available, or at least
On a
ways
localized
to, at
basis.
least ways to get
Yeah.
some of that information. But you'd want that research to be localized because it's very specific to
local.
communities,
Mhm.
yeah.
I think, this is particularly an area where, I lead with this because this is an area that is so significant and so important. It really does provide an opportunity to develop a better understanding about how we can move the needle and what has to happen to move the needle in partnership and with others. Obviously, we, workforce development models and the lessons learned from workforce experience on wraparound programs for participants and workforce. There's lots of ways that we might be contributing to an overall effort. And I think we have opportunity in the regional plan too to articulate that if it's the responsible or lead party is not us, who it is.
And I think one of the things you said in your introduction too is the language and the importance of language, and it's critical, certainly. And that we're all, when this is done, that we're all using the same language to mean the same thing. And as I'm reading these, it's really interesting because I'm thinking many of these could mean something different to people sitting around the table. And so sort of synthesizing that into a universal language
Yes.
is very challenging.
Chair Cummings, it is challenging, and one of the things I try to keep in mind is that it is fostering, I think, better partnerships, a better understanding of what our coworkers are doing, how our coworkers think. And while we might have very different disciplines, developing a shared, a set of a shared language, some kind of vernacular that's similar, we understand each other a little better.
This is interesting. It's going to be, are we going to be able to see this?
Yeah, we'll keep it, yep, we'll document, we'll share it back, yeah. You ready to move on to the next question?
I think we're ready.
Okay, great.
Is everybody ready to move on?
Is there,
We're ready to move on.
There are 48 questions.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Ready to go right now.
Yeah, sorry. So this theme, who needs to feel more welcome or safe in our region, where and when? Thinking about, what does that look like? hope my animation is more interesting than it is annoying. It's supposed to suggest a river of progress. Let's see what we get here. One thing I want to ask is there a difference between personal safety and a feeling of belonging? Because there's like, well, you know, I'm not going to get mugged on the way home, but do I feel like that I'm a member of this Twin Cities community and not just a group? And I know Greater MSP works on trying to get people to move here just because, you know, people move here because of a job and then really like it, but they don't, you know, we perhaps don't sell ourselves. We've got a lot of recent negative stuff, but we don't sell ourselves. Okay. I'm waiting for one to pop up again the next interested. Maybe I can tell myself. Oh, this one here. Can we maybe have a talk a little bit about more if the author is willing to share that? What you mean about the trade-offs there?
That's me.
Okay.
What I meant is that we cannot focus just on solving the victims of crimes issue without also dealing with the very obvious cases of police abuse. I mean, we can be in a very safe society if we have tanks on every street corner.
Right.
We don't want that. On the other hand, we don't want to have like a free-fall zone with no law enforcement presence anyway. So I'm just bringing the two extremes to say that we need to focus on both ends of the spectrum, hopefully meeting in the middle.
Right, I think we might want to avoid a UK type surveillance society where we have cameras on every street corner that actually create a real sense of safety and belonging, where we look out for each other. I think that's a message that we share. Law-abiding transit users, that's me. Well, so here. Anybody want to expound on what they see or what they've shared?
You know, can I, Mike, I just,
Yeah.
I was trying to keep my mouth shut, I just couldn't do it. Just so
Do
on
it.
this.
No. Please.
Well, just on that last interaction, and you know, and I think it's fair to say we don't want a, you know, UK style surveillance society, but I feel like that's putting a block in something before we even sort of start talking about it.
Okay.
And I mean, I for one would feel safer in a
Okay.
UK style surveillance society, and I think people in the UK probably feel safer that they're
Yeah.
on camera
Yeah.
900 times a day or something like that, you know? And so I'm not saying that's the direction we wanna go.
Right.
I'm saying I don't feel like we should put a block. And
Right.
I'll just say, you know, I represented on Minneapolis City Council the sort of anti-government ward, and people were really touchy about, you know, there was a lot of concerns about police behavior, but about surveillance. And when we got to a point where we started to implement camera systems, they started in my ward, not surprisingly, and I was just braced for all kinds of pushback from the community, and it just didn't show up. And the first system we put on was along Bloomington Avenue, and we got more educated, more sophisticated and about interoperability and stuff. But then when I walked down Bloomington between like Franklin and 24th, which was unlivable, before the cameras were installed, people literally come out of their homes and their businesses and say, thank you for putting these cameras in. So I don't wanna presuppose that people feel a certain way
Yeah,
about
yeah.
any kind of safety
Yeah.
solution.
Well, I occasionally will, you know, assert things, and push things a little bit, and I've got a thick skin, so don't feel like you can't challenge maybe
Cool.
my perspective on it or what I see. And I'm also of the belief too that we can have maybe competing ideas, hold them together.
Right,
Yeah.
agreed.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I appreciate Robert speaking up, because I kind of bristled at that
Oh, you did?
too,
Okay,
but
okay.
I didn't say anything, and we actually had some privacy advocates flip out when we put better cameras on the trains with real-time camera systems, which is something we should have had a long time
Right.
ago. You know, but people are like, oh, you can't do that because, you know,
Yeah.
people will lose their privacy. It's, okay, you're in a public place and we're using it to catch criminals. We're not using it to keep track of where people are and turn them into their boss if they go to the Twins game instead of going to work. You know, I mean, it's, we're using it to find murderers in 26 minutes.
Or to
which-
prevent
Yeah.
murders, right? Right, and so,
Oh, great.
yeah, and, yeah.
Well, I'm quite pleased that I provoked something.
And I really saw it in a lot of, like I said, it was like anti-government central in my ward, and people prioritize safety over privacy. I mean, I just saw it time and time again.
Well, and if you're just moving the criminals somewhere else so they're victimizing somebody one block over, you haven't really accomplished anything. But having a place where people can come out of their house and not worry about being abused in some way
Right.
is
Right.
important. I mean,
Yep.
you can't build wealth if somebody's wrecking your house or
Right.
stealing your stuff or, you know, stealing your car and starting it on fire somewhere like happened today. I mean, it's just crazy stuff going on right now.
It wasn't at my house, was it? Never looked at the news. Should we move on to the next question? Okay, great. See if I can poke the bear on this one. What do you see as our biggest regional economic opportunities or challenges? Cameras is probably a solution to that one on here.
Right, there you go.
curious to see what people think, where the downtowns are going, how they'll recover or adapt, and especially in relationship to that Build Back Better idea. Wondering if, I'd like to hear more about that. It suggests that we've lost something and then want to replace it with something that was better, so. Hyper-local economic development, interesting. Kind of incubator, focused neighborhood entrepreneurialism, that kind of thing, maybe? That's getting at?
Yeah, so that was mine, and yeah,
Okay.
and that even, from my perspective, even the smallest communities, or some that have businesses and things, they have the interest in their own vision. And so, I represent one city essentially, and then Robbinsdale, one suburban community. And so it's nodal or neighborhood based. The city of Minneapolis, as you know, has the cultural districts approach. But just my guess is that those could be supported and amplified fairly geographically equitably throughout the entire region.
Right.
It's those local visions.
Yep.
I guess it's acknowledging the local community knows best.
I noted that the pandemic has caused so much disruption that provides an opportunity for us to build back better and more equitably. But there's so many unknowns. But, with so much disruption, you're almost forced to make some changes.
Right.
I think I put up there, I think an opportunity is post-pandemic, we have more political will and more public will to not go back to the way we were doing things, and more of an awareness that it didn't work and many people were suffering in major league ways. And so I think that gives us an opportunity. It's a huge challenge, but it gives an opportunity to rethink everything and how can we move forward so that everyone can thrive rather than the select few.
Councilmember, may I ask, when you say everything, what maybe is the first thing or two that comes to mind about kind of doing things? What happened? Maybe, there we go. About doing things really differently. Is that around transit or housing?
Opportunities, home ownership, the ability to build wealth, transit, certainly the access to jobs, medical, grocery, all of those things. And in addition, I think the other thing when we talk about transit that we don't talk about very often, we talk about the people needing to get to their jobs and to the doctor and to the grocery store, but this is a culturally rich area that offers so many wonderful opportunities for individuals, and we need to find more ways that more people can take advantage of all of the things that we have, that we do take advantage, many of us take advantage of and are able to, but that's kind of lost or way down on the list or something. But access to jobs, the new paradigm on how people are working, all of those things, I think. Housing, certainly. Councilmember Brober.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I love your remarks. I think that is really spot on. But one of my key things that I put as a challenge is lack of public investment. And sometimes those aren't purse strings that we control. So how do we help try and, enlist others to help us to do that, or help other entities, or convene the right people to, even if it's somebody else, to do some of these things.
Helping support a case is something that we can do with policy or research.
Yes.
Thanks, again, so this is going a little off the page, but what Councilmember Barber just said, I really appreciate that. And I had some other comments that I already prepared before we came here, and I'm not seeing quite where they fit in, but maybe I'll figure it out as we go. But it's almost like an implementation piece, right? And so we have this planning. One of my comments was, in a lot of the values or vision statements, it doesn't feel like something that a unit of government would say. it's sort of general, yeah, you know, it's great to live in a beautiful region that's safe and prosperous, or, you know, and placing ourselves as a unit of government in that statement, I think is important, and it gets to, in some way, what Deb's talking about, I think, where what we do and what we don't do. You know, and we were just having a conversation before this about tab, because lots of us have a lot of tab experience through the years, and, you know, Deb does that for us now, and we're very grateful. And there was a big conversation about safety on transit and safety at transit stations. You know, not directly the mission of tab to address, you know, and there are people around that table that have resources that could be put toward the solution, different resources, but it's the showing people where things can happen, where they can tap in, how something can be implemented, how their resources can support regional goals. And I just had never really seen that, and maybe it's just something I've missed in our development guidelines, but to me, yeah, that's important, almost like that implementation piece, or, you know, yeah.
Madam Chair, if I may respond, you know, I think that's something that we definitely keep front and center around the role of the Metropolitan Council, the extent of our authority and our influence, and the role of the 2050 Regional Development Guide. It's between this different system plans and policy plans, our role and authority can be so vastly different, and it's very nuanced. So I kind of struggle a little bit with, should be, you know, we kind of flagged this, should be referring to, should we essentially own the region in this statement, or do we state the Met Council, you know, X, or the Met Council and its partners, or the Met Council encourages others, that kind of thing. You know, and the director, Barajas, may have something to contribute to that as well. She looks perked up with that, maybe perhaps not, no?
So, yeah, thanks, and I appreciate it, I love that you're thinking that way, and that, you know, how we state it, and I've been clear, I think my whole time during my term on at council, about sort of what regional leadership looks like, you know, and so, to me, that's what we're talking about here, is as regional leadership, which we are, constitutionally, you know, we have both formal and informal ways of influencing, and so, and I just feel like that culturally, we don't exercise all of the leadership that we could, just because of the political dynamics in our region and the political complexion of the Met Councils, you know, and so I feel like this is the kind of that idea of leadership, what that means to the region. That's what I guess I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Anybody else want to jump in? Do you have enough on that one, or we do the next
Sure,
question?
we can move on. Yep. Happy to. Next question. What should the goals be for housing throughout the region? All of them. I know, there's so many things. One thing that we might consider is the challenge the challenges of providing choices in different parts of the region because the nature of the community might be fully developed, the cost of the land might be significant, local political support might, be more or less supportive. The accessibility of those locations to other services or needs that a household might need, just how, how to think about that.
Madam Chair, I put choices on there, but that doesn't mean that every place works for everybody, because not everybody wants the same thing. You can't make every community affordable to everybody Edina would have like 400,000 people. If there's some people who would like to live in Edina but don't because they can't afford it. I mean, the cost is a factor for almost everybody.
Yeah. One of the things I think about is, the somewhat arbitrariness of some city boundaries, and some cities are quite small, some cities are quite large. The accessibility of a certain area from one part of the region to the other. Anoka and Coon Rapids versus Lakeville and Louisville. Those kinds of sub-regional. What does it look like at a sub-regional level? That's maybe not just a city boundary, but.
Michael,
Yes.
if somebody didn't say this on the economic challenge, if you put in your notes that broadband access is a factor.
Right.
In that there are a number of spots in our region where there are serious broadband issues.
Right. Right.
And frankly, that kind of fits in with the housing too for people that are, working virtually or.
Yeah.
It really
absolutely.
came up for the virtual schooling.
Absolutely.
Well, when we think about accessibility, not just transportation, not just moving for the sake of moving, but accessibility to services or goods or work, broadband is certainly a significant cross-cutting issue.
Has everybody had enough time on this one? You have what you need on this one?
Yeah, I think one comment that I'll have about when I see the word eliminate, that's something we're struggling a little bit about the idea of elimination of problems versus, going from bottom of the list to above average, kind of way to frame these things. It's like, yeah, we'd like to eliminate all of these problems, but is that the way to, is that the kind of language we'll want to use? Is that the kind of language you want to use? Anyway, I will move on. As the region redevelops and grows outward, so redevelopment, intensification within the existing built area, as well as some outward growth. What should be our goals for protecting or restoring natural resources? Or, if you will, natural resource systems, natural systems. I like the concreteness of the goal, 25%. Start my yard.
I don't know, I've spent $700 this month on having fallen branches from my yard, so.
I hear you. I definitely hear you. Yeah. Yeah. Take down a big tree is really expensive.
I'm at the number of your tree person will be. I think the estimates I got for removing a tree were like 14,000.
Well, what's on?
God.
I mean, there's a range from about 4,000 to 14,000.
We have a really, really good guy who really undercharges us, and we fix his truck as sort of a,
Oh, nice. Barter.
but I'm not giving out his name because I don't want everybody else to wear him out.
Fair enough.
I will only charge 13,000.
Okay.
I was gonna say,
I got a chance.
Well, I think we're
Yeah,
asking
just
right
like
after
that.
those two storms, and so it was like peak demand.
I will say that there's a lot of passion amongst the technical staff and natural resources or water protection and that kind of thing for around this issue. So got a lot of participation.
We had a good discussion in Mossack at our last meeting about what the rules are now compared to what they were 100 years ago.
The rules, yes.
Yes,
Mhm.
and how the area around Minnehaha Creek would probably look more like Hugo if it went under the rules today, as
Probably.
opposed to the ones that were around when that area developed.
And Hugo isn't gonna look like Hugo much longer.
You know, again, to Councilmember Lilligan's point about, who is the us or we or I in this statement of our goals and thinking about, I think we're always thinking about role, whether it's like, ownership or influence or regulation, and we don't really have regulations, but others do. And so we can articulate maybe, the importance of the roles of others as a collective way to ensure the integrity of the natural resources. Gets a little old saying the council and our partners, so, I wanna
Yeah.
think about that, yeah.
Well, and that would be an argument, Michael, for putting it up in sort of the values, vision kind of way,
Right.
so you don't have to be
Right,
repeating it.
right, definitely, yeah.
And I'm not saying that it's easy, I'm not.
Right, no, yeah. But we do have land use policies for the region. So hopefully good partners. Practice what we preach, of course, always. I believe we are. Yeah. For the most part, at least what I've heard. Maybe.
I put that one up there, it's just a reminder, it's not an
course.
accusation.
No, I think leading by example is something that is, I think, part of our culture.
Yeah.
Yep.
We actually talked about it this morning at the climate work.
Oh, you did,
so,
okay. Sorry, I missed it. Another important source of input into this. Oh, Indigenous land care strategies. Yeah, I'm not sure,
What does
kind of
that
sure
mean?
where that came.
I put that in, so I would
Yeah.
just say, it kind of relates to sort of the idea of land back or something or that. And I'm trying not to use the word steward, because I had an elder recently kind of scold me for that, because
Oh.
that comes from the animal care world. And so she objects to
Oh.
that when people say stewards of the land or stewards. So anyway, so I was trying to dance around the word stewards, but just acknowledging that people lived on this land for millennia.
Yeah.
Without, destroying it, poisoning it,
Right.
through industrialization. And so what does returning to indigenous sort of methods? And, I think that in a lot of ways, a lot of the damage we've done to our planet, indigenous solutions are the solutions, and I'm not saying indigenous, to this country, everyone's indigenous to somewhere, right?
Right.
It's just sort of the distance you have since colonization or since your culture was, colonized. And so So just sort of everywhere. So I guess it goes back to that kind of local thing as well. There were people taking care of this land for thousands of years, and they did a better job of it than we're doing.
Do you have suggestions as to how, this is the values of Indigenous communities and our tribal nations has come up in the past, and it's not, I don't think very well represented right at this juncture. And but our intention is to engage tribal nations and Native American groups locally. Do you have suggestions about how to bring them into the process and help with articulation of these things?
Yeah, I have a ton of suggestions, and so probably more than
I know we could do this
well,
offline.
but I guess my overarching suggestion, Madam Chair, thanks, would be go to them. Go to their, there are, I mean, I could name 5 organizations, MN 350, a bunch that are sort of native led and about either protecting the land and water. But that means that we would have to legitimately want to be in those conversations, which can sometimes be kind of radical, sometimes a little bumpy, but.
Well, that's our plan. Just want to make sure that we didn't miss something.
And Madam Chair?
Yes.
And if I can add on to that, I think that's really critical to go out and talk with the community. So SMSC, Councilman Wolf and I were in several conversations during comp planning with them. And we've gone out and done some of that, and it's the only tribal nation that fully resides within the metropolitan region.
Right.
So I think it's critical to engage them very early on. And when you talk to them, they're very self-sufficient in their land use and what they've done with their own wastewater systems and how they're doing all these things and how they're doing, even purchasing land stuff down by the river to try and reclaim some of the cultural identity and bring it back. And I think it's really important, especially when you talk a topic like this, that you want to be talking to them early and often.
Yeah.
Well, and some of this kind of fits in with something that I put on here about collaborating with the rest of the state. What we do at the Metro Waste Treatment Plant impacts Red Wing, Winona. I mean, frankly, we could think of a million ways that overlaps with the rest of the state.
I think that's such a good point, Madam Chair. And just kind of going back to my experience in Minneapolis, where we invested $1 billion over protecting the river from combined sewer overflows and other things. And so we got to a point, at one point, where the water leaving Minneapolis in the Mississippi River was cleaner than the water coming into the city of Minneapolis. But at the Bedote, when it met with all the agricultural junk coming down the Minnesota River, it just got filthy again. But because Minneapolis was the licensed, or we had permit from the feds around about pollution, we became responsible all of a sudden for all of this agricultural contamination from a river that we really didn't have any control over. So I think that really goes to, it's another aspect of what you're talking about, Councilmember Vento, that especially rivers, right? They flow, and so stuff flows with them.
Well, and it fits in, I was talking about this morning too. Betty McCollum has a proposal in Congress. Tammy Duckworth, the senator from Illinois, is the House sponsor of bill, and the Mississippi River Restoration Initiative, and it parallels the Great Lakes Initiative, which was put in place years ago to clean up the Great Lakes. And Betty thought, why not have one for the Mississippi River? And quickly you realize it's not just the Mississippi River, it's the Crow Wing, it's the Root River, it's all of these. And your point about Bedote, if you've never seen the picture, the aerial picture of where the Minnesota and the Mississippi come together, it'll almost make you sick to look at it, because it's just startling.
I think that whole theme of unintended consequences or things that we can't control could go certainly beyond just this conversation. We could apply it to everything that we've talked about, transportation, transit, housing, everything that we talk about. The unintended consequences must be considered and are sometimes hard to gauge.
Well, I think think it was around Christmas time, Charles has heard this story probably a million times, but around Christmas time, I got a phone call from a business person up in Rush City wanting to know if the Rush line was still gonna come to Rush City. And all I could do to keep myself from laughing or crying, it was pinch myself. And I got through the conversation, but, you know, our transit impacts the rest of the state, hugely. I mean, it's just, and frankly, our work on housing. You know, if there isn't affordable housing in Austin or Stephen, Minnesota, or Breckenridge, there's a good chance that those folks are gonna come here expecting housing, hoping for housing.
But then even in fact, like impacts transportation funding, where we invest big transportation dollars. We use Highway 212 as an example, and he's gonna just ignore me because she's heard this so many times now. But I mean, it wasn't in the transportation policy plan when I came on council. It wasn't listed even in there. It's one of the biggest freight corridors in the state. It does, I forget how much a percentage of the grain in the country. It's a ridiculously high amount. But it had significant problems because it was 4 lanes to several, and then it went down to 2. And so it was just a huge mess. Well, got it into studied and researched, and it got highlighted as one of the freight corridors and designated truck corridor, gets in the transportation policy plan, and then you turn, now the segments to fix the road are being fixed and being expanded to 4 lanes. And that is not, it's a huge impact to the state, it's a huge impact to the economics of the metropolitan region, and all these things. And it's really how do you, I mean, we had this conversation, how do you change something? It's slow, I'd love for it to be faster, you know, but it's that sort of thing, but it's impactful for the whole state, it's just one road. Right.
Very good example.
Madam Chair, I have 4 more slides.
Is that all?
We're almost to 48.
Serious?
Time flies when you're having fun.
Yeah. So, just 4, so I can advance if you'd like. Alrighty, here we go, next one. Okay, it's kind of broad, but how can the transportation system better serve the region's people and economy? Think about goals. I'm gonna defer all hard questions to Charles.
So I'm here. Here, I think the river kind of shows the freight movement.
Yeah.
Waterborne.
I thought it was like
barge
so many,
traffic.
it's metaphorical for so many things. It's a working river too, it's not just recreational.
The Friends of the Mississippi River has one of its founders, who's still a board member, worked for years in the barge industry. And every year when the Friends would have their annual fundraiser, they would contribute a barge ride. And that barge trip was one of the biggest money drawers for the live auction. People would go nuts over that opportunity.
Want 212 to be any better in this plan?
I'm happy right now,
You're happy with it?
well, when the construction's
Yeah, okay.
right now.
169 need any improvements, maybe?
Don't even get me started.
I think it's the only principal arterial that actually saw an increase in traffic during the thing.
I believe that's true.
Really? What
It's,
caused that?
it's always.
I think it's still a lot of freight and delivery and
You talking about 212 again?
So it's the
169.
biggest break are 212, 169, and 13. And so, especially like with an Amazon warehouse during a pandemic off of 169. I mean, that's, right now, I can guarantee you, any time of day, you'll stop on the way home.
So because people are at home buying more. Straight.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really interesting.
Did they get the pedestrian bridge down on 62 yet, so that can reopen?
I don't know, I did just hear about that, yeah. Jeez.
I haven't heard any updates, but what I had heard is that through Thursday, so through tomorrow, is okay.
That's creating a mess everywhere else, 'cause the other alternatives have to absorb the extra traffic.
So one of the studies that's being done by the MPO that I think I'm really excited about is the study on e-commerce and its impact on the transportation system, its potential benefit to VMT and land use considerations and that kind of thing. So I'm excited that we're looking at that.
I'm just curious, Mike, are we coming up with things that haven't been brought up before, or is it sort of expanding?
There are no new ideas.
That's what we're here for.
Ever. Well, since I am a member of TAC and part of the working group for the TPP, I'm quite familiar with like the studies or the considerations that are represented by the list here. So, but I think from what we'll need are kind of broad goals for the transportation system as well. So I think there'll be a feedback loop there from what we learn and the input that we get from TAB or TAC, and it's a lot of process. Yeah. But I was hoping like we'd get like 50% VMT reduction. You could just throw that in and we could run with that.
I just put.
It's probably a little high, a little bit high maybe, I don't know. Like,
I'm just gonna keep chuckling.
oh, 50% by 2050, 50 by 50. Yeah, don't go anywhere half the time. By 2050.
That's a great slogan. Come to Minnesota and stay home.
Get out, but not too much.
Hey,
That's very Minnesotan, actually.
I just saw something that, the state fair has 100 police officers ready for the state fair. And it's like, seriously, and we're struggling to find staff. I think we ought to have somebody go out and recruit these 100 people so that come early September, they can come work here.
I thought it was 200.
200? Okay,
Yeah.
well, whatever it was.
I think it's licensed officers from other departments that are working.
Yeah, they're borrowing
That's
them.
what they
Okay.
That's
Well,
what
It helps to read the article, not just the headline.
Yeah, some
That's
people
what
take
headlines are.
vacation and then go work at the fair during their vacation. And I know at least one person who is licensed but doesn't actually work as a cop anytime other than the fair.
Okay.
She's a lobbyist the rest of the time, but.
I don't do any planning on vacation. That's.
We still working on this one?
It looks like it. I'm seeing fingers.
Stop poking people so we can go on to the next one.
We could probably get you out here a little early. Is this going till 7? I think?
Well, we can't see any of the extra ones anymore because it's not
Oh.
bouncing up and
Come
down.
on, get rolling.
I followed directions, Michael, and put 50%
Oh, there's a
VMT
lot.
reduction by 2050.
Yeah, I don't know why it's not good. Well, anyway, apologize for this one's not scrolling. I thought I had checked them all, but 50% reduction by 2050.
Oh.
It's good to have goals.
Can someone elaborate on what the existing heavy rail opportunities means? Is that shifting freight to rail, or
Where
is
is
that
it?
passive? The one, it says look at existing heavy rail opportunities. is that passenger rail? Is that what we're?
Anybody wanna own up?
Oh, okay.
No, yeah, passenger rail.
Okay.
Like an impact now, yeah, it was already free,
Alright, cool.
so linings rather rebuild, new infrastructure for lines.
Yep, reliability issues important. I have a story from my youth on that one.
Get fired from your job?
No, but it was, somebody missed their stop and the bus got back on the freeway and I'll tell you the rest of the details after the meeting. He was distraught because he thought he might get fired from his first job. Yep. Yep. Add water taxi and ferry service, wouldn't that be fun? That'd be a goal in the region. Well, and I think with EV charging, a significant amount of effort is being placed into planning, and I think that would, in those, we probably establish goals for coverage, certain coverage areas. Okay.
So if they do a water taxi, I will take the express over to Minneapolis and then water taxi to Psycho Susie's.
That'll be one of those stops.
You'd have to get transferred because you can't use the locker room.
Oh, that's right.
Oh, that's right, so much for the working river, sorry.
We'll have to find another.
Get off one water taxi and walk to the other side.
Minnesota's maybe more the working river.
I could do a tour of the Stone Arch Bridge and then.
Yeah.
There you go.
Well, it's really
I've
interesting.
never been
idea.
to Psycho Susie's, so that's mine.
Have you been there?
All right, next one?
Please.
Okay. Where are there opportunities to enhance community or economic vibrancy in the region?
Things aren't showing up.
No? Did you enter something?
No, because all I could turn is everywhere, so I'm being more creative than that.
Oh, there we go, there. I think I mentioned, downtown, the health of downtowns and the recovery from the pandemic and changes in work and travel behavior. Those places might look like, or also thinking of, so like a lot of these place-based economic initiatives related to medtech or to the greater MSPs initiatives, just thinking about place in that way. What's it called?
Man, my typing is bad.
I know,
There we go. You gotta just scroll away.
And it's so bad that they can't even come up with suggestions on how to fix it.
Yeah, my husband confuses spell check all the time. I gotta give him the first 3 letters to get him going.
One of the ideas I think around regional goals by how we support these places, because I think research and practice, shows that these centers of activity are important for the region's, the dynamics of the region's economic health, and whether or not it's like the 212 corridor, it's a MedTech corridor, it's downtown Minneapolis, it's Opus, or those kind of things.
The places that it works though are the ones that have champions on the ground that want to keep it nice. If it's coming from the outside, you go fix it up, but nobody cares about it, it's just gonna get beat up and yucky again.
Right, I think there is sort of an organic quality where you have stakeholders, including leadership, champions, as you mentioned, yeah. Everywhere. Culturally appropriate opportunities in parks. It's inappropriate might be. Yeah, Stellingen University. See good things happening there. No small, I'm thinking Stellingen, the Stellingen University areas seems to be coming alive with the stadium and the housing businesses. I think we have a lot of Swedes here, so draw upon that. Everyone still going?
You done, Sue?
She's just tapping her fingers in. Anybody want to comment on what they see or what they're sure on?
I
Yeah.
just have a question about what's happening in Sweden and Denmark
Yeah, why it's
that's
so big.
different. I mean, I suspect that they have robust, like for example, transportation systems without public safety issues. If that's just an example, I'm not sure, but why would that be? So why is Sweden better?
So that was my comment. Anybody who's been to some of the major countries of Western Europe can see the difference in investment on education, health, and all other aspects of society, and it shows the result. I mean, there was the earlier comment about surveillance in the UK. Population of London is almost 9 million people. The crime there is a minuscule fraction of what we have in New York City or even Minneapolis. And the cops don't wear guns. But that's the result of a number of things that they have done through a number of years in making sure that certain things are addressed, especially on the poverty side. There's no alternative to that if we want to have a vibrant communities to invest on people. And that's the secret. And just think about 150 years ago, why the Swedes and the Norwegians came over. Their countries were actually the worst places in the whole of Europe. They were so poor, they had very few economic opportunities. That's why they came here. Same with Ireland. The reason why they don't do that anymore is because those situations change and they had no need to leave everything behind and come over to a strange land. I mean, that was the level of despair that those folks had. Once you take care of the causes, the root causes of that poverty and inequality, then you have societies that cops don't need guns and the lifespan of the people is way higher than here in the States. Crime is almost non-existent in many cities because of the investments they've done in the last 100 years. So I love Europe, been there. My mother is from there, so there's so much that we can learn from the major Western European countries, and people don't look at those models to do the things that work, because it works there.
So, if I could comment, I'm glad that you gave examples of not only in investing in the positive aspects, but examples historically of what happens when you disinvest outside of this country. We have a lot of examples of that in society that we could look at. It's not always a local problem, or a political problem. It's a societal issue. And sometimes we try to make things about, the political aspect when if you take that situation and move it to a different location or a different society, you're gonna get the same results in terms of investing or disinvesting. And we already know that, but we sometimes, pretend or we forget. So history is really important for helping us to plan.
All right.
Anybody else ready to move on?
Next slide. I think this might be, yep, whoops. Whoops.
You're done. You can't
That was my
answer that
last one.
question.
Okay, so my last one. Hold on.
This is one.
Technical glitch. So I want to ask you, as we start to think about, becoming more concrete with material for your review and feedback, and as we continue to solicit input and ideas and stakeholders and build those relationships, what policy areas might be, how do I make this bigger? There we go. Water planning, oops, I'll just leave it be, sorry. Yeah, where you may be most helpful for your conversation versus things that you may be already very familiar with. I like the water planning right over the river there. Oh, I like what I did there. So there's plenty of water planning to share with you. White paper.
Well, not very many characters here, it's just one word. Just trying to figure out how to encapsulate something you said, Wendy, but I thought it was really important about local champions, like, I can't remember, was that the word that you used? You know, and, yeah.
Because if you look at the places that really work, there's a small group of people who are really passionate about making it be good and working through all of the hurdles. Where if you swoop in from somewhere else and just dump some money.
Right, I think that's important practice knowledge and that we can use to inform programming. So like you said, we don't just dump money, but our funding, you know, things that really have the necessary components to be successful.
I remember being on the train one time overhearing two college students talking to each other, and one guy said that he didn't like his neighborhood because it looks nice, but it's not safe. And, you know, this
Right.
money had been dumped in to make it look good, but it wasn't a place that he wanted to be and was looking for somewhere else to move to.
Oh, goodness. Remember back when sort of non-motorized transportation planning was really taken up, so maybe 12, 15 years ago. And I was at a MnDOT workshop, some of you were probably there, and there was this map, and I think it was down around like Rochester area, there was a community. They were showing where like non-motorized planning efforts had happened, and they were clustered usually around the cities. And there was this community down in Southwest that had really developed plans. And I kept asking, why is that? What's happening in that community? Why are they so far advanced? And after about 5 questions, it came out that there was a city staffer who really valued and championed that, you know? And you could just see on a map how much difference that made. You know, that's kind of what I'm trying to get at here. That would be useful to know where those champions are.
Yeah, from a goal standpoint, I don't know how, like, that's an important idea that I think warrants exploration and elevation. But in terms of change, we can't, like you said, money is just one component of it, policy is one component. Really, the passion behind it is key, was sort of essential, for sure. Can I ask about funding comparisons? What that means?
I entered that. I would just say that, to Deb's point, I mean, the challenge that we face as a region in terms of long-term, dedicated, predictable funding. How do we compare to other peer regions or
the reliability or the certainty of the amounts, that kind of thing.
regions that we feel like we're in most competition with?
Right. I think most regions are jealous of us, but that's true. There's definitely, at least when I go to other places, they're like, wow, you have regional planning.
Yeah, but you hang out with planners too, so.
Guilty.
Right, but we don't have, you know, I mean, one example would be we have very limited dedicated transit funding, for example. Do we have, and what is our dedicated community development, you know? I mean, we created some of our most discretionary funding, right? But I mean, to me, that's kind of what that'd be helpful.
Lots of goals and lots of things that even the legislature wants us to do, but no tails with funds,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, like regional park funding that's supposed to be 40% and is like 8 now.
So that, I'm gonna put this down, unmet, what would we call that?
State funding.
Statutory requirements.
You'd like more information on that?
Okay. Statutory,
Put a percentage mark there.
Yeah.
Save you.
Well,
It didn't let me use special characters.
Oh, I didn't.
I tried.
no special, oh, shoot. Okay, good to know.
So if you have things that should have had something as
You can just shoot me an email with all of your special characters. You know, and again, the conversation I think is really helpful and useful and insightful. Some of this may lend itself to goals or vision or values, and some of this are just, I think, important, you know, food for thought about what's on your mind and kind of what might carry forward into, you know, policy discussions in the future.
I have a hard time with this question because I feel like I have a lot of information, but I don't know what information other people at the table have that needs to be shared.
Yeah.
Or is there information available from other regions of the country, you know, that might be beneficial to us in trying to tackle stuff? I mean, rather than reinventing the wheel.
Sure.
Can you kind of give us a review again of the process going forward and how you see this?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think, you know, we are also engaging staff, you know, as I had mentioned, to identify where you know, their ideas for how we might articulate based on kind of policy conversations that they've been part of, a programmatic conversation, where they see as us being effective and goals. And that's information that we will share with you. I see there is definitely an appetite for starting to transfer or pivot into kind of a more concrete set of language to react to, rather than continuing to brainstorm. So, and I think one of the things that we've emphasized too is we want to ensure that the language we use and the goals that we had are shared across policy dimensions and are help inform the policy plan development and their clarity and effectiveness. We do want to continue to engage, you know, various stakeholder groups and start more of a general public engagement process to identify input, so we don't get quite too far ahead of ourselves with you know, something that's proposed for adoption. But we will bring more concrete things, draft or structures for you to react and comment on, so that they can be further developed and refined. Hopefully that gives you at least a little bit of a sense of what comes next.
I think this would be, maybe you have and maybe you're not going to, but this specific exercise would be interesting to bring to the EAC. And see what kind of advice.
Yes, good suggestion, yeah. We met with them back in April, so we might be due to re-engage them in this, yeah, for sure. I think that was a very positive experience with them, and we might be due to, you know, re-engage them just to assure that, you know, we wanted to keep them as a touchstone.
Sure.
Yeah.
Anything else you need from us?
That's it for tonight.
Yeah, but great, and this is a great exercise though, to see how it unfolds and develops. There was one thing I wanted to bring up and I just wasn't sure, you know, I kind of put it in my notes, it's the one thing I haven't been able to bring up. And it's just something that comes up in CDC so often now, that I feel like it's rising to more than just sort of an objective or an action, it's not like a value almost, or something, I don't know where it fits in. But as we're looking at developing, you know, the development guidelines, and this is getting, I'm gonna get really specific for a second, and then hopefully kind of pop back up to 40,000 feet, but the inequitable burden on different communities that even engaging in this creates. And we had quite a bit of conversation at CDC, and we've had a lot of good response from staff to, you know, we have our grants and things like that, but it's just, especially as we're getting sort of the tail end of our comp plan approvals, and you're seeing these tiny communities of like 500 people and things, and so there's a geographic equity piece there that there's a disproportionate burden on smaller, less resource-rich communities.
Yeah.
And I mean, it just comes up every conversation. So to me, it feels like it's kind of percolating up as almost like a value or something. I don't know. I just wanted to.
Well, and it might even be,
I was just gonna say thank you, because I know I've been saying it, look at this, Angela used to be my sector rep, so she's heard me saying this over and over and over. I know Councilmember Wolf has said the same thing. Same thing, these little tiny towns or townships, and how do we make it right size, because they don't have planners, they don't have people to do some of this work, but how can we provide resources or help or simplify things to make it better? So thank you.
Yeah, I have communities with 125 people.
Right. Or even managing a planning grant could be a capacity stretcher, right?
It's more than they can do, yeah.
So, if I may follow up, clarifying, your point. I understand fully the burden of having to develop a comprehensive plan. Are you also talking about participating in this regional planning exercise as well?
More the first part,
Okay,
but I think that
okay.
kind of relate, and so I guess I never thought of it, that's like an unfunded mandate, right? And so,
Yeah.
Yeah.
none of us in the
Yeah.
government like that, you know, and so, to me, there's this opportunity for more regional harmony if
Yeah.
some communities don't feel like we're burdening them, you know, with
Well,
with our own requirements.
It's definitely in our work plan to make that easier, and at some point, we can talk about what are ideas and planning for that, yeah, to make that easier.
Well, and some of them may not all be populations of 125 to 500,
Right.
but may have housing base and that's very moderate to low income and or very little economic development, and as a result, don't have much staff. I can't come up with an example of that right off the top of my
But
head.
these guys could, cause they're not.
They're not.
I can give you a few.
Yeah.
I don't wanna pick on the communities.
I could give you a bunch.
Yep.
Right,
Well, and it's hard for them to even participate in any of this kind of stuff. I mean, Minneapolis and St. Paul have people that's their job, is to pester us and get their vision into the regional plan, where a lot of these smaller communities, they don't hear, they don't feel like they have any say. I remember being in a farm advisory group in Scott County years ago, and they were talking about a ordinance that the county was coming up with for having chickens. And it had that the chickens had to be in an enclosed building all the time. And one of the farmers said, God, I'd hate to eat the eggs that came out of those chickens. You know, what knowledge are we missing from those people?
Oh, we don't know what we don't know.
Yeah, and that's had a big deal for me. We got somebody from the township on LUAC.
Mhm.
Because that voice, I mean, he drives from Laconia Township to St. Paul for meetings. And, you know, his passion is a farmer whose passion is water, right? But it made a big difference to have that voice at the table. And because in my time in council, I hadn't seen a township person on any of the boards. I don't know.
well, it contributes to that narrative, right, that we're the big bad Met Council, you know, hammering down on all these
Right.
communities, so if there's a mitigation for that, or.
Well, I think too, when we, you know, as we identify, you know, we're trying to follow the principles of the council's public engagement plan and identifying stakeholders that we can reach. I think we do want to kind of go back with these different lenses. Is are we being, you know, much of the region is urbanized, and you know those are stakeholders, but the stakeholders in other parts of the region that are less popular also matter, and they're also significant to the region's quality of life and well-being and economy too. So to the degree that they maybe don't have a voice, we would compensate, you know, for the Minneapolises that are always at the table. So points well taken.
Thank you.
You know, everything we do has an impact beyond the major cities. That's just an excellent point. And we invite participation, and yet we put up barriers to that participation. And that does not bode well for our reputation, and it's certainly unfair, and it's certainly, you know, to your point to Wendy, that we don't get the ideas and the input and stuff from everyone that we should to be the most effective agency that we can possibly be. So I think that's an important point. Thanks for bringing that up. And it does come
All the time, I mean, we're talking
every
about all the time,
meeting.
that's why I just feel like it's more than just an objective, it's
Yes.
becoming like a
Yes.
value.
And this is the time to be looking at it and thinking about it, not after the fact, or not when you're bringing in next year's or next season's comp plans and saying, oh gosh, I guess we forgot. This is the time, let's bring it in now.
Thank you.
So, yeah, thank you. Anything else you need from
No,
us?
and
That's
thank
terrific.
you very much. I really appreciate your.
That was a great
your thoughts.
exercise, it was terrific, so, thank you. Does anybody have anything they need to?
Can I make a quick
Yep,
comment?
please.
The name of this program, Mentee, in Spanish, mentir means lie. So, and when you say
Can you tell
I,
us that after 2 hours?
and when you say I lie, is yo mentí. So I was completing this thing and thinking, I'm lying every single time I'm clicking on this thing. So,
Funny.
yeah, that's all I was thinking for this whole thing.
Yeah, and I have a Chevy Nova.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
No, I don't have a Chevy Nova, that's like ancient history, but yeah.
That's like a textbook example of
Yeah.
what, not, of not
Yeah, try
listening
sell a
to the
Chevy Nova
market,
in
yeah.
next door.
Not understanding your market.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anything else anybody wants to comment on? Otherwise, is there a motion and a second to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned.